Wrestlers playing a race outside of their own is a fairly common occurrence when it comes to the industry. More common than many of you might think. But regardless of the many examples of this happening, well, a mere 10 of them are going to be the topic of this episode. Because today... A big thank you to Baba Yaga and Jeremy P, as well as to all of my Patreon supporters for your really helping me out a lot. Alright, so the topic of race can be a pretty sensitive subject, so I just ask that you please maintain being respectful down in the comments section. And furthermore, there is a difference, as I pointed out in another video, between race, ethnicity, and nationality. However, for the purposes of today, there have been many a wrestler who has portrayed something different other than their own for each of these categories, and we are going to be taking a look at some of them. Furthermore, this is just
I know, I could name a wrestler that belongs in this list, one you probably never heard of.
This is just a small sampling of times where this has happened, so there's no need to bring up other wrestlers who have done it down in the comments section.
What about Jinder Mahal? He's of Indian descent, but he's also Canadian.
Because I'm more than happy to do another video about this topic, and I really do want to because there's a whole lot of wrestlers out there that I could have mentioned. So if you are interested in a follow-up to this video, please let me know down in the comments. Anyway, with that being said, let's go ahead and just get into the list. Okay, so we start this list off with a rather obvious one, Muhammad Hassan, whose real name is Mark Kapani, and while he no longer wrestles, he used to be a part of WWE where he portrayed an Arab wrestler, although he is actually of Italian descent and is from upstate New York. Now allegedly, WWE was supposedly trying to set him up as a neutral character, letting the audience decide whether or not to cheer or boo him. However, when you see his initial appearance for WWE TV followed by his manager, Daivari, screaming at the crowd, I think it's pretty safe to say that they obviously set him up for heeldom. But before this, Kapani was part of Ohio Valley Wrestling in 2002, where he would wrestle under the name of Mark Magnus. And he would even win the OVW Heavyweight Championship by defeating Johnny Jeter, and then the following year he would find himself on WWE's main roster. However, he would wind up being written off WWE television after a controversial angle featuring men wearing ski masks coincided right before the London bombings took place. This warranted a lot of negative criticism, and in response, UPN, the network that was hosting SmackDown at the time, expressed that they did not want Hassan's character on their television. And so the decision was made that The Undertaker would give the last ride powerbomb to Muhammad Hassan at the next Great American Bash. Following this, and Hassan would never be seen or heard from again in WWE. And while he would occasionally step back into the ring here and there for independent promotions, he is currently now a principal at Fulton Junior High School in Fulton, New York. Next is Kofi Kingston, a wrestler who's had his inconsistency with his exact origins presented front and center right on WWE TV. Born in Kumasi, Ashanti in Ghana, Kofi's family would eventually move to the United States, and Kofi himself would graduate from Boston College. He would begin training on the independent circuit around 2005, making his wrestling debut for Chaotic Wrestling, until finding himself in the WWE's then developmental territory of Deep South Wrestling, as well as getting to spend time in OVW. Then in 2007, he would begin working dark matches for Monday Night Raw, and he would also adopt the last name of Kingston, which is the capital of Jamaica. Following this, and he would start working for Florida Championship Wrestling, before getting a series of vignettes debuting him on ECW, well, the fake ECW that was on Sci-Fi at least. And this is where he would be presented to the audience as Jamaican, and in fact, he's actually the WWE's first ever African-born performer. Now, this particular portrayal lasted until October 19th, 2009, where he spoke without the accent and the character was quietly phased out. And by quietly, that was until a particular episode of Monday Night Raw where Triple H would call Kofi out in front of a live WWE audience. But following this, Kofi would begin celebrating his heritage on WWE TV, with it even being a major point of pride for his WWE Championship reign. The Russian nightmare Nikita Koloff was well known by many wrestling fans for his work in Jim Crockett Promotions and also WCW. Originally billed as being from Russia, although that would change to Lithuania after the fall of the Soviet Union, as it turns out, neither of those are true, as Koloff was really born in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and as a youth he would begin weightlifting as well as playing football in both high school and college. From there he would try out for the USFL, when it would be none other than Road Warrior Animal who would suggest that he become a professional wrestler. And so he would audition for Jim Crockett Jr., who would repackage him as Nikita Koloff, the nephew of Ivan Koloff. Now,
Did you know that Ivan Koloff wasn't really Russian either?
yes, I know, he's Canadian. Anyway, point of the matter is, let me remind everyone that if you want other examples, I am more than happy to do a sequel to this episode. So if you want to see that, just let me know. Anyway, continuing on. But his biggest feud would have to be against that of Magnum TA, a rivalry that all began when Koloff attacked the then US champion of Magnum. This resulted in a best of 7 series, taking place during the Great American Bash tour. But then, after TA was forced into retirement and America and Russian relationships were improving, Dusty Rhodes saw an opportunity, and he decided to do the unthinkable and turn Nikita Koloff into a babyface. Furthermore, proving his dedication to the role, Simpson would learn Russian fluently, and he would also have his name legally changed to Nikita Koloff in the 1980s. Okay, so now it's time for yet another obvious one with Akeem the African Dream, whose real name is George Gray. He began wrestling in 1977, traveling throughout multiple territories such as Mid-South Wrestling and WCCW. This was before he landed in the World Wrestling Federation in 1987. Now, he would begin his career in the House of McMahon wrestling as the One Man Gang, who was managed by Slick. And during this initial run, he would routinely have main event matches as a jobber to the stars, usually serving as the big bad who would only get vanquished by the babyface. And even though the OMG gimmick was working, in September of 1988, WWF decided it was time for a change. For some reason. In storyline, and only in storyline, it was declared that One Man Gang was actually of African descent and he intended to embrace his African roots. Now, this was followed by a lot of negative stereotyping, and if that wasn't bad enough, the gimmick was also taking shots at the American Dream Dusty Rhodes. Gray would then form a tag team with the Big Boss Man, calling themselves the Twin Towers, and from here he would slowly start fizzling out until October of 1990 when he would exit the World Wrestling Federation. He would then make a very brief stop in the USWA before joining World Championship Wrestling, where he would revert back to his One Man Gang character. After that, he would make a quick stop in ECW before eventually returning to the WWF, albeit for very brief appearances, like a dark match in 1998, as well as his role in the WrestleMania 17 Gimmick Battle Royal, where he would once again be the One Man Gang on WWF television. Allegedly, it was because he lost too much weight to wear the Akeem costume. Thomas Borg was born in Croatia and wrestled under the name Paul Diamond. He was known particularly well as being one half of the tag team Bad Company with Pat Tanaka, although this would not be the only time that these two would pair up. But before that, when Borg was 13 years old, his family would move from Croatia to Canada, and from there he would receive a soccer scholarship for Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia, as he originally wanted to be a professional soccer player, which he would get to do for a number of years before going to professional wrestling. After making the decision, he would train under the Malenko family before going to Texas All-Star Wrestling and eventually the CWA, where he would team up with Tanaka. But then the two would find themselves reunited yet again in the World Wrestling Federation after Tanaka's original partner in the WWF, Akio Sato, decided to take a position in the WWF front office. However, even though the two would be working together yet again, they wouldn't be doing it under the moniker of Bad Company. He also wouldn't be wrestling under the name Paul Diamond either, as instead he would be the wrestler known as Kato, wearing a mask to hide his ethnicity, as Diamond was supposed to be playing an Asian wrestler, although this wouldn't last for very long as he would soon adopt the gimmick of Max Moon, which also was only for a brief amount of time too. Then after this, Tanaka and Diamond would find themselves reunited yet again in a variety of different promotions. And next we have Hulk Hogan. It is kind of funny to think of the Hulkster as an ethnic specific character, considering that he was always presented as a super American babyface. But once upon a time, and during the original conception of his Hulkamania persona, Hogan was meant to be just that. For you see, while I did already cover this in a previous video, I thought now would be a good time for a quick refresher. Up until this point, the House of McMahon had mostly revolved its efforts around one central idea for their world champion, and it was that of the ethnic hero, with Bob Backlund being the first all-American to be champion. Now, as strange as it might seem, this was pretty radical thinking for the time, and so the original belief was to return back to WWF's classic formula of booking an ethnic hero, and this time the ethnicity in question was supposed to be Irish, with reports being that Hulk Hogan was originally supposed to dye his hair red, which of course didn't work for the Hulkster brother. Anyway, despite being originally conceived as an Irish-American character, the reality was it wasn't even necessary, as Hulkamania was just all about all-American wrestling. And also the fact that Hogan, well, isn't actually Irish, with Hogan's true ancestry coming from multiple countries, such as Italy. However, Ireland isn't one of them. But speaking of Italian Americans, that leads me to... And topping this list off, how could it be anyone else other than the group, the Full-Blooded Italians, especially during their run in ECW. This faction all started when JT Smith, coming off a legitimate head injury, decided to parlay that into a kayfabe angle where he believed himself to be old world Italian. This would lead to him teaming up with his quote-unquote cousin, Damian Stone, who's better known to WWE fans as Nunzio. From here, the two men would expand their group to include other wrestlers such as Tracy Smothers and Tommy Rich, both of which are not full-blooded Italians to say the least. The stable served as a comedy act for the original ECW, but they didn't stop there, as they also expanded to include a lot of other members that some might not have remembered were a part of the group, such as Viscera, Kid Cash, and the previously mentioned one-man gang. But that's not the point, as I'm merely calling out that not every member of the group was exactly that. And
I guess you didn't realize that was the joke. You're supposed to know wrestling.
I know that was the gag, that's not
I must say that the wrestlers I would have chosen are better than yours.
Well, there you go. 10-ish wrestlers who played races other than their own. Are you interested in seeing another video about this topic? Let me know down in the comments, and please make sure you give this video a big like and that you subscribe to this channel. Thank you again to all my awesome Patreon supporters, and thank you for watching. And as always, Dave knows.